Happy Friday and welcome to Cornhole Champions, Iowa Starting Lines podcast where we throw bags at the state's biggest stories. I'm Zachary Oren-Smith. As part of the Hotspot, Iowa Starting Lines investigation into Iowa's high cancer rates, I'm looking into why Iowa's skin cancer rates are comparable with states like Arizona that have way higher levels of UV radiation exposure. You can find my full report at iowastartingline.com, but to kind of expand out this conversation, I spoke with Dr. Marta Van Beek. She's quoted in the story, but I wanted to include the full interview that I did with her. She's a dermatologist at UI Healthcare. She's great for so many reasons, but I really dug her no-nonsense dispelling of some skin cancer myths that I had internalized over the years. If you're watching this on YouTube, like and subscribe for more stories about Iowans for Iowans. And with that, let's get to the show. Dr. Marta Van Beek is a clinical professor of dermatology at the University of Iowa and an executive director at the University of Iowa main campus ambulatory clinics. Her research focuses on melanoma epidemiology, and she's here to join our conversation about Iowa's cancer rates. Hello, Dr. Van Beek.
Good morning. Pleasure to be here.
It's good to have you here. Iowa ranks 5th nationally for melanoma incidence, which, when I was kind of going over this, that seemed a little surprising to me. I would have anticipated that more, for whatever reason, southwestern United States, southeastern United States would appear much higher than Iowa would. And so I was just a little surprised about just to find that skin cancer rates were as high as they appear to be in the state of Iowa. Do you have any sense as to why that might be? How do you explain that to folks?
Yeah, it's because of our agricultural population. We know that melanoma and non-melanoma skin cancers, such as squamous cell carcinoma or basal cell carcinoma, are much more common in people who work outdoors, much more common in people with fair skin, and with the heritage in Iowa and the outdoor occupations such as farming and agriculture. We have a lot of people that are significantly at risk because of all the sun exposure that they've had, whether it's been at work or in their entire lifetime.
And is that much different than, Nevada? Is that much different from Arizona? I would just anticipate. I'm just surprised that it's that would have that large of an impact on our numbers. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, thinking about how much of our population works outdoors compared to other states, it would that actually definitely contributes. But then also Iowa is one of the states that's part of the SEER registry. So we do a really good job in Iowa of tracking our cancer rates. Our College of Public Health at the University of Iowa has long looked at these cancer rates. And so I feel like not only do we have a population that's higher at risk, but we are more diligent about making sure that we keep track of those cancer rates so we can make sure that we can intervene, whether it's behavioral risk factors or other things that we know that might decrease that risk for a patient population.
Yeah. Like you say, agricultural workers face a much higher rate of skin cancer, something like 60% higher rate than the general population. What specific challenges do you see with Iowa's farming communities when it comes to skin protection and early detection?
Well, it's hard to encourage a lot of people when they're outdoors and it's hot and sweaty to continue to disrupt their work and reapply sunscreen. We recommend that you reapply sunscreen every 2 hours. And if you're out in the fields or with livestock and trying to get things done, to pause and remember to do that, it can be quite disruptive.
2 hours?
Yeah, every 2 hours, just because the sunscreen degrades or with sweat and friction, it can rub off. So we recommend every 2 hours. That also, I have a lot of patients that don't like the way the sunscreen feels, whether it's sticky or that sort of thing. When they're trying to get their work done, it's dusty outside and they feel like the dust collects on it. There's lots of alternatives. There's creams, there's ointments, there's sprays, there's sticks. And so I try to encourage my patients to use whatever vehicle is the most comfortable in trying to reapply, making sure they keep it in their truck or in their cab or that sort of thing where it's easily accessible.
Have you found that conversation with patients has changed much over the last couple of years, or is it more or less the same conversation you were having when you kind of began in the field?
I believe that there is more awareness, that people know about the importance of sunscreen and how much of an effect it can take. I do believe that culturally it's less popular to have a tan or to have tanned skin when, or, seasonally compared to what it has been in the past.
You're saying I'm in vogue. That's
Yeah,
wonderful to
I say
hear.
we're
That's
exactly what we're looking for. And I think the socialization of wearing hats and long sleeves has also gained popularity.
hmm,
Those conversations were really hard 15 to 20 years ago, and I feel like now with more um, accessibility of protective sun clothing, whether
hmm.
they can buy it online or it's available now in many stores, that it's become much more acceptable.
So, I mean, is that downriver? Is that downriver from accessibility, or is there like kind of a? I mean, is that just like kind of does culture kind of drive that? Like, how does
I think
that?
it's both. I think
I think
it's
it's both.
accessibility and cultural awareness and cultural
Hmm.
acceptability. And then even when we think about the mechanics of farming, I mean, it used to be that tractors had no cabs and no shade, and now they have cabs that are completely enclosed, where the person who is in there, whether combining or harvesting or whatever they're doing, they now can be protected from the sun. That
Right.
was never really an option previously, just from the machinery.
When I'm thinking about the kind of just impacting rural
Mhm.
agricultural workers, day workers in particular, rural Iowans often live far from dermatologists and specialized care, right? I think
Mhm.
like you say, you're saying about just the articles of clothing. I think there is a more general access issue with trying to
Mhm.
get some of these getting an appointment booked.
Yeah.
How do these geographic barriers affect diagnosis timing and outcomes for your patients?
They have significant impact. There have been some national studies that really have looked at the distance from a patient to a dermatologist and how early they can get diagnosed. We know that the earlier we diagnose you, whether whatever type of skin cancer it is, the better you do.
Hmm.
And specifically talking about melanoma, we know that if we catch it when it's a very thin melanoma, your cure rate is much higher. We can treat you with simple surgery rather than having to have you go through systemic therapy. So the goal is always to treat people sooner. But we do know that the longer ways you live from a board certified dermatologist, the often you will get diagnosed later because access is more difficult. We do have good partnerships with primary care in that, primary care is doing a great job in
Right.
trying to detect some of these lesions and conducting biopsies locally and then referring the patient from the standpoint of after they've had a diagnosis. But still, there are many nuances in clinically trying to diagnose a skin cancer and having that high degree of threshold of whether something should be biopsied. So we do need more dermatologists in the state, and we do need better access.
An oncologist I was speaking to in Des Moines the other day was telling me that kind of one of the difficulties with skin cancer is we're talking about a really long kind of incubation is probably
Latency.
the wrong latency. There we
Uh-huh.
go.
Yeah, yeah.
That's a much more
Hmm.
accurate word.
Hmm.
There's this long latency period between kind of an exposure occurs and kind of
Hmm.
when something observable develops, right?
Exactly.
Does that how does that impact the ability for us to diagnose skin cancer? Like, that seems like that's it's not a piece of this that I would have intuited as a
Yeah, I
difficulty.
don't think it necessarily impairs our ability to diagnose them, but I feel like the patients, when they have an exposure, it feels less risky
Hmm.
because there is such a latency from the exposure to when they could have or increase their risk of diagnosis.
Interesting.
We know that melanoma is very significantly tied to the number of lifetime sunburns. Just a few number of sunburns, blistering sunburns, can dramatically increase your risk of melanoma. But then other non-melanoma skin cancers like basal cell and squamous cell, which are more common than melanoma, but also require treatment and can require the patient to have surgery, which can be very concerning for them,
Right.
is related more to chronic sun exposure. So it's not only burning, but is also tanning. And so it's important for patients to know that there is no such thing as a healthy tan. That in order to tan your skin, you are damaging your skin so much so that it's reacting by trying to create more pigment to protect itself from further damage.
Hmm. And you've kind of teed me up for my next question.
Hmm.
Iowa is one of only 6 states with no restrictions on tanning bed use.
Hmm.
When we said that this was one of the kind of pieces of Iowa's cancer rates that we were looking into,
Hmm.
a lot of folks slipped into my DMs wanting to ask about tanning beds. Right? I think there's a lot of interest. I mean, I think what you brought up about like kind of the ag sector, construction
Hmm.
sector, and like kind of the greater environmental impact that contributes to this case. I think probably like a much more representative, much larger piece of
Hmm.
this situation. But if I got a dermatologist here, I have to ask about kind of what is the recommendation on tanning bed use?
The recommendation is do not use a tanning bed.
Okay.
That's an emphatic
Asked,
do not use.
asked
Yes.
and answered.
Well, and I would say, unfortunately, many of our melanoma patients were chronic tanning bed users
Is that
once
right?
upon a time. Yes,
Well,
it's often it's one of our standard questionnaires, just because there's enormous amounts of literature that has been published over the decades showing a direct connection from tanning bed use and your risk of melanoma and other non-melanoma skin cancers. Because like I said, there is no such thing as a safe tan, and you have to damage the skin to get a tan. And it increases your risk of many types of skin cancers in
mm,
addition to melanoma. So we recommend strongly against tanning beds. We often, if people feel like that they feel better with uh, tanner skin than what they were born with, you get spray on tans, and those are perfectly safe. It's a sugar moiety that's sprayed onto your skin. And actually, they've come a long ways in the last couple of decades. I've been fooled by a couple of patients where I've started my lecture about that they're too tan and they're like, it's a spray on tan. So, I mean, they look pretty good, pretty legit.
and safer, right? As opposed to
Yes, much
um,
safer. Hmm.
but there is still this kind of drive, I think, to get tanner skin. There is this like sense that we feel healthier. There is a sense that you know what I mean, right? Like you're like, am I wrong into having
No,
culturally intuited that? I mean, that's
people used to call it a healthy tan. That's why that's why dermatologists try to say there is no such thing as a healthy tan, because people do feel healthier. And what the science has shown is while you get tan, whether it's in a tanning booth or in the sun, you do release some endorphins. So you do feel a little bit better. So
hmm,
there is an addictive component to getting tan, and that feeling. And so a lot of people who are chronic tanning bed users, it's really difficult for them to stop because of those endorphins and that sort of thing. But there's other safer ways to get endorphins.
right, yeah. Australia is an example of a country that has like, really tried to emphasize the impact that sun exposure can have on their population's health, right? And they've had some success with their kind of nationwide project. I'm curious about what when you're looking at the United States, when you're looking at Iowa, like if there have been campaigns that you thought have been really effective, or if there have been approaches that you would like to see implemented. Like blue sky here, you're a
Mm-hmm.
dermatologist that wants to mitigate the
Mm-hmm.
amount of cancer,
Mm-hmm.
the amount of sun exposure that folks
Mm-hmm.
are having. What would work? What do you think should we be considering?
Well, you're right. Australia is the leader in trying to manage skin cancer prevention
What is
in
the
the
motto? It's like
slip,
slop.
slap, slop.
Slip, slap, slop.
Slip.
That's a, we
Yeah.
can play. We actually play a little clip of that
Oh.
ad right here.
Slip, slop, slap. In the sun this summer, slap. Slip, slop, slap. Slop, slap. Slip on a shirt, slop on sunscreen, and slap on a hat. Slip, slop, slap. You can stop skin cancer, slap. Slip, slop, slap.
Or you could just actually do it, slip, slap, slap.
Slip,
But
slap,
I think
slop.
it's like slip on a shirt, slap on a hat, slap on some sunscreen or something like that. So not only have they had that national campaign, but they actually required sunscreen in elementary schools. They required sunscreen for all outdoor workers. Employers were required to supply it. So when you have it embedded in the culture like that, then they have made a lot of headway in trying to decrease the skin cancer rates. And there have been lots of really good studies about how important childhood protection from the sun decreases your rate of melanoma long term.
It's
It goes
interesting.
kind of back to what you're saying about that there's a long latency between the exposure and when you can actually develop a skin cancer. The The issue with that is I often will have patients in their 50s will come in and say, well, it's too late now because I had so much sun exposure as a kid. Why do you care whether I wear sunscreen now? And my answer is, if you want to spend a lot of time with me in your 70s, then you can be very cavalier about your sun exposure because I'm going to see you a lot in your 70s. But if you want to decrease how much time you see me and spend how much time you have to see with me on the operating table, then it behooves you to wear sunscreen in your 50s because that directly affects how much skin cancer you get a decade or two later. So it's cumulative and it counts, and it's never too late.
It's cumulative. It counts. If you want to stay off Dr. Van Beek's operating table, apply sunscreen.
Yep.
Wear a long sleeve shirt, stay out of the sun when you can.
And stay out of the tanning bed. Exactly.
Dr. Marta Van Beek is a dermatologist at UI Healthcare. Dr. Van Beek, thanks so much for joining me. This has been a blast.
My pleasure. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
That was another episode of Cornhole Champions. If you have questions, please send them in to zach@iowastartingline.com and be sure to include where in the state you're writing from. We're an audio medium, so send us a voice memo if you're brave. Keep questions to under 90 seconds, please. We'd love to hear from you. While you can watch Cornhole Champions wherever you listen to podcasts, the best place to subscribe is on our YouTube. That's youtube.com/iowastartingline. Like and subscribe to help us grow this platform. The single best place to follow my work and every twist and turn of this show, go to my Substack newsletter. Give me a follow at cornholechampions.substack.com. We are on Instagram and TikTok with clips from this show and videos thinking through the stories we're covering every day. Give us a follow if you like the show. I think you'll like what you find there. Last, Iowa Starting Line's flagship newsletter is a tremendous resource full of stories about this state. Subscribe to it at iowastartingline.com/newsletter. I don't think you'll be sorry you did. Cornhole Champions is a weekly podcast powered by Iowa Starting Line. This podcast is produced by me and edited by Rebecca Steinberg. Our music is by Avery Mossman, and our show art is by Desiree Tapia. Cornhole Champions is a proud member of the Iowa Writers Collaborative. We'll see you with a new episode next Wednesday. Until then, I'm Zachary Oren Smith. Thanks for listening.